Chapter 2516, Killed with a Single Punch. Chapter 2516, Killed with a Single Punch. Peng. The palm swung over, triggering power fluctuations of the regulations. The Celestial King in Black was just about to turn around and re-enter the fog, yet his eyes suddenly bulged out. Had he seen a ghost? Ling Han was still standing there, safe and sound. In fact, he even cracked a grin, although this grin didn't make the man feel any sense of friendliness. Instead, he felt as if his head were about to explode in fear. How is this possible? So you've been concealing your strength, the Celestial King in Black exclaimed, immediately coming to a realization. Being able to block his attack was a clear sign that Ling Han's strength had definitely reached the Celestial King tier. Thus, regardless of whether he looked like a Celestial King or not, there was no doubt that he was indeed a Celestial King. Otherwise, his reaction would have been impossible. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Did I offend you? Why do you insist on killing me? Humph. You're clearly a Celestial King, yet you're still being so pretentious and purposely obscure. Your intentions deserve death," the Celestial King in Black said in a baleful voice. Even if Ling Han were a Ninth Heaven Celestial King, he would still be unafraid. This was because the Nine Deaths formation would suppress everyone's cultivation level to the First Heaven. Here, everyone was a First Heaven Celestial King. As such, what did he have to fear? Ling Han laughed, and said, "Your words put me at ease. Now I can kill you without feeling any guilt at all. See, I'm a fairly friendly and kind person, aren't I? Unlike you. Not only are your clothes black, but even your heart is as black as charcoal." The expression of the Celestial King in Black instantly fell dark. Just how proper and solemn were Celestial Kings? Yet, Ling Han actually dared to taunt him like this. How immature. He didn't speak another word. Instead, he simply stared at Ling Han with killing intent. He would simply kill this person. There was zero need for so much drivel. Die. He immediately lashed out. Boom. His large hand transformed into a black sun that radiated with a scorching heat that could easily melt high-level pseudo-divine metal. This was the lunar fire essence. Ling Han was astonished. This lunar fire essence couldn't be refined by any random person. Instead, it could only be refined by those who had a deep understanding and comprehension of the great Tao of fire. In his view, only monarch tiers and above could possibly refine lunar fire essence. However, would a monarch tier be unable to pass the Nine Deaths formation and enter the Martial Academy? "You didn't refine this yourself, did you?" Ling Han asked. As he said this, he casually threw a punch. Peng. The black sun was instantly obliterated, unable to withstand the might of his punch. The Celestial King in Black was shocked. Not only had his ultimate attack been blocked, but even his secret had been exposed. The lunar fire essence indeed hadn't been refined by him. Instead, he had extracted it from bones that he had found in the tomb of an ancient Celestial King. However, as a mighty Celestial King, he was actually using power that he had obtained from a corpse. Now that he had been exposed by Ling Han, he involuntarily felt a sense of shame and anger. This was even though Ling Han didn't know where exactly he had obtained this lunar fire essence from. He then felt a cold chill run down his spine. Just how devastatingly powerful was the lunar fire essence? Even he didn't dare to come into contact with it. This was naturally because it hadn't been refined by him, so he was only using it as a precious tool. He would only release it when he needed it. He trembled in fear. To unleash such might, just how insane was his opponent's battle prowess? A thought suddenly occurred to the Celestial King in Black, and he stammered, "Why you re the person who defeated Yang Zhishuan with a single punch before?" When news of this had spread, it had caused a huge commotion and argument, with most people adamant that this was only a baseless rumor. After all, how could a person below the Celestial King tier achieve such a feat? Now, however, he had also come across an equally freakish person whose cultivation level clearly appeared lowly. Yet, his strength was as domineering as could be. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Your guess is correct. Now, why don't you take another guess? Will I spare you or not?" If this person hadn't especially come out from the fog to kill Ling Han, the latter would have also ignored such a minor character. However, not only had the Celestial King in Black revealed killing intent toward Ling Han, but he had even acted on this intent. Thus, Ling Han naturally wouldn't show any mercy. This was a completely different situation from the one with Yang Zhishuan. A thought occurred to the Celestial King in Black, and he suddenly turned around to flee. He charged into the fog. This fog had a powerful ability to separate people, so even if two powerful Celestial Kings walked into it hand in hand, they would still be gradually separated without them noticing. They could only challenge the formation using their own strength. Thus, once he entered the fog, he would reach absolute safety. In the future, he would also flee far away from this place, avoiding this murderous person forever. "Heh, can you flee?" Ling Han said with a soft chuckle. He bent his knees before unleashing an explosive burst of power. Peng! His speed was terrifying as he caught up to the Celestial King in Black in a flash, throwing a punch at his back. The Celestial King in Black was petrified to death. He hurriedly channeled all of his power to his back, aiming to block this strike. At the same time, he would also borrow its momentum to charge into the depths of the fog. This was his only way to survive. Peng! The punch landed, and the Celestial King in Black's defense was instantly ripped apart as if it were wet paper. Like a hot knife through butter, the punch then ripped through the Celestial King's body, eventually protruding out the front of his chest. The Celestial King in Black was still running, yet he suddenly discovered that his power was rapidly draining away. His expression was dazed as he stared at the fist that had suddenly appeared before his chest. His eyes dimmed, and his head drooped. He was dead. Boom! Blood rain fell from the sky. Ling Han casually tossed the corpse of the Celestial King aside. However, he didn't forget to search his body. After all, there was no reason to abandon his spoils of battle. Without a second glance, he strode into the fog. This wasn't the first Celestial King that he had killed, so there was no need to think much about it. "Brother Lin, what do you think about this brat?" Inside the Martial Academy, two young men were currently enjoying a game of Go. There were no ribbons of iridescent light around them, and it was as if they were ordinary people. However, their eyes were incredibly sharp and intense, and even heaven and earth would tremble under their gaze. Brother Lin smiled faintly, and replied, "This brat has experienced a greatly fortunate encounter. He's clearly at the third heaven, yet he's already been tempered by fundamental power. His battle prowess is simply astonishing. However, he's no well-behaved person. He's already started killing people immediately upon arriving," the other man said with a smile. "This person was brought over by your junior brother Ju, so in the future, he's also going to become a disciple under Lord Lin. The power of your branch is truly going to defy the heavens." He performed some calculations with his fingers, continuing, "Your esteemed master is a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, and Brother Lin is a 6th-tier heavenly venerate. Brother Ju Hang and Brother Chu Hao are also 6th-tier heavenly venerates. Counting this brat, your branch will have 5 heavenly venerates, with each having the potential to reach the 7th tier." Brother Lin laughed heartily. However, he shook his head, and said, "Even though Junior Brother Ju, Junior Brother Chu, and I are all at the 6th tier, trying to advance to the 7th tier, will be as difficult as trying to ascend the heaven. In terms of this brat, he's indeed got a good background and foundation, so it won't be difficult for him to become a heavenly venerate. However, whether or not he can reach the 6th tier or even 7th tier is up to his fortunes." The other man nodded in agreement. Becoming a heavenly venerate wasn't dependent on talent alone. It would also be affected by countless other complicated matters. If someone heard this conversation, they would definitely be shocked to the core. This was because their words revealed that they were heavenly venerates. Moreover, one of them was a paramount 6th-tier heavenly venerate. Indeed, this Brother Lin was none other than Lin Xiaoyang, son of the 7th-tier heavenly venerate, Lin Luo. Meanwhile, the other person was Fu Yuyun. Both of them were 6th-tier heavenly venerates. "However, I still admire Brother Lin the most," Fu Yuyun said with a smile. "Brother Lin's cultivation talent isn't outstanding, and in the past, you even lagged far behind your 2 senior brothers. Now, however, you've already caught up to them. In fact, you might even advance to the 7th tier before them." Lin Xiaoyang shook his head with a smile, saying, "That's all thanks to the hard work of my father." Meanwhile, junior brother Ju and junior brother Chu are genuinely accumulating their cultivation for the future. Once they release it, their accomplishments will be no less than that of my father. As for me, the 6th tier is most likely my limit. Chapter 25:17 Remarks by Heavenly Venerates. Chapter 25:17 Remarks by Heavenly Venerates. Brother Lin, we truly don't need to worry about this brat. Fu Yuyun asked, changing the topic back to Ling Han. Lin Xiaoyang smiled faintly as he placed down a stone. He then said, "That brat has strong opinions, and junior brother Ju has already said that we simply need to give him space to grow. There's no need to worry about him." "All right then," Fu Yuyun said with a nod. He then continued, "I've set my eyes on that fire girl, and I'm planning to take her as my disciple. You guys won't try to compete with me again, right?" Lin Xiaoyang involuntarily laughed, saying, "No, definitely not." Fu Yuyun nodded in satisfaction upon hearing this. He then placed a stone in reply. Lin Xiaoyang was slightly curious as he asked, "Brother Fu, why didn't you choose Heavenborn?" Fu Yuyun shook his head, and replied, "At the current stage, Heavenborn is indeed more outstanding. However, he's the culmination and embodiment of a dimension's willpower and essence. Even though he has a huge advantage in this sense, I predict that the 3rd tier will be his limit. Moreover, that will be after heaven knows how many hundreds of epochs." Lin Xiaoyang raised his thumb, praising, "Brother Fu is truly thorough in analysis. My father also remarked the same thing about this person. Moreover, he has a violent and ruthless personality, so who knows how many troubles he'll end up causing. Sigh, this is a rare chance to rest in peace for a few days. In a while, we'll have to leave the dimension to battle with hysteria again. I truly relish these peaceful days," Fu Yuyun said with a sigh. Lin Xiaoyang smiled faintly, and said, "Brother Fu, there'll eventually come a day when we dispose of hysteria and return to our respective homes. At that time, it'll be difficult for us to meet again. Right now, in order to face hysteria, the elites from countless dimensions were gathered here. However, once hysteria was defeated, everyone would naturally return to their own dimension. As such, it would naturally be difficult for them to meet again. Ideally wish that this brat is, as Brother Ju says, becoming a main force in the victory against hysteria in the future," Fu Yuyun said as he gazed into the distance. It was as if his gaze could pierce through all matter as he observed Ling Han, who was currently challenging the 9 Deaths formation. Lin Xiaoyang smiled faintly as he pinched a stone in his fingers. He had always been an optimistic person. Ling Han suddenly shivered, feeling as if he had been observed by some devastatingly powerful being. However, as he looked around, all he could see were layers of dense fog. He saw nothing else. Was it just my imagination? He shook his head. There were definitely heavenly venerates in the martial academy, so perhaps there had been a heavenly venerate observing him just then. With their paramount power, how could the 9 Deaths formation possibly block their vision? Ling Han strode forward. Whoosh! Clouds and mist gathered before him, transforming into a leopard that viciously lunged at him. Peng! He obliterated it with a single punch. Its vitality index was around 5,600. That's indeed powerful enough to trouble ordinary celestial kings. In fact, ordinary celestial kings were already emperor tiers. After reaching the peak stage of the 1st heaven, their vitality index would reach around 5,600. Now that the formation was producing such types of opponents, it was no wonder that most celestial kings would face a great deal of trouble. After all, monarch tiers were pitifully few in number. Ling Han continued to advance. Meanwhile, the formation also continued to produce opponents to face him. Sometimes there would only be a single opponent, while at other times there might be 2 or even 3 opponents. This would greatly trouble most ordinary celestial kings. In fact, it might even force them to flee. However, Ling Han could easily defeat all of them with a single punch. It didn't take him long to exit the land of fog. What appeared before him was a city. This city wasn't large, yet it was surrounded by a wall. Moreover, the city gates were also closed. On the 2 sides of the city were mountains that towered into the clouds, forming a canyon that the city sat in. In fact, the city was the checkpoint that blocked this path. If one wanted to continue forward, they would have to pass this city first. Ling Han didn't find the sudden appearance of this city strange. Nor was he astonished by the appearance of the towering mountains. After all, he was inside a formation, so he wouldn't be shocked even if stars and the core of the world appeared. He arrived before the city gates, only to see that it was filled with messy scrawls and symbols. However, even though they appeared messy at first sight, upon closer analysis, these symbols immediately appeared in his mind. It was as if he didn't need to remember them at all. The symbols flashed chaotically, giving him a headache. The city gates were tightly shut, and they were also decorated with a messy scrawl of symbols. It was evident that if one wanted to open the gates and enter the city, they would need to rearrange these symbols into some kind of specific character first. This was the next test. However, Ling Han wanted to try another method. He took a deep breath and bent his knees slightly. He then suddenly unleashed his power. Pang! He immediately soared up, aiming to directly jump over the city. Crack! Devastating arcs of lightning flashed chaotically, directly striking Ling Han from the sky and smashing him into the ground. Oh, that hurt. Ling Han bared his teeth in pain. Even with his astonishing physique, he still felt bone-crunching pain after being struck by the lightning. Sure enough, this city couldn't be bypassed with such ease. Then what about the city gates? He immediately threw a punch. Pang! The city gates remained unmoving. However, the shock of the punch caused his entire arm to ache. At this moment, Ling Han had no option but to solve the problem as required. He retreated several steps before looking up at the city gates. Even though the symbols had all appeared in his mind just then, they wouldn't remain there for too long. Thus, he had already forgotten all of them. This was extremely strange. Shah! There was the soft sound of footsteps, causing Ling Han to turn around. He saw the celestial king in green dashing out from the fog. He had initially been composed and graceful, yet right now, his clothes were ripped and his body was riddled with wounds. He appeared extremely disheveled. However, when he saw Ling Han, his expression was as if he had seen a ghost. He had truly seen a ghost. Otherwise, how could this brat appear here? Moreover, he was even quicker than him. The celestial king in green was absolutely stupefied, with his mouth slightly agape. Even though celestial kings were calm and composed, unblinking even if the heavens collapsed before them, he couldn't help but lose all of his composure at this moment. In fact, he was on the verge of spitting his tongue out in shock. This was far too strange. This was absolutely inconceivable. So Brother Green was still first, someone said with a strange laugh. Ling Han looked over, only to see the celestial king with the large head and small body making his way out of the fog. He fared no better, with his body drenched in blood. However, he was still burning with fighting spirit. However, he instantly spluttered in shock upon seeing Ling Han. He wore a dumbfounded expression. So as it turns out, I'm third, the Plum Blossom Celestial King said as she appeared. Her clothes were also slightly tattered, revealing some of her alluring and snow-white skin. A thought suddenly occurred to Ling Han. These Celestial Kings always challenged this formation together, but this wasn't to see the Plum Blossom Celestial King in her current state, was it? The Plum Blossom Celestial King also spluttered in shock as she stared at Ling Han with a dazed expression. Afterward, the remaining two Celestial Kings also walked out from the fog one after the other. They also wore stupefied expressions when they saw Ling Han. In fact, the 5 Celestial Kings were all sharing the same thought at this moment. They had seen a ghost. Ling Han waved, and said, "We meet again." The 5 Celestial Kings felt as if they were in a dream. Even though Ling Han was standing right before them, they were still unable to accept and believe this. "Friend, so you've actually concealed your power this well," the Celestial King in green finally said. His voice was filled with emotion and realization. He was the first to be shocked, so he was naturally also the first to come to his senses. There was no other possibility. Ling Han had definitely been hiding his strength. His true cultivation was definitely at the Celestial King tier. So we were all fooled, the Celestial King with the large head said. There was slight displeasure in his voice. This person was clearly a celestial king, yet he purposefully acted like an amateur. Was he trying to toy with them? Heh! Where's friend Ran? The plum blossom celestial king asked as she looked around. Quite a while had passed, so why hadn't he appeared yet? The 6 of them had already challenged this formation together many times. The gap between them in strength was small, and it was usually the celestial king in green who would reach this area first. Meanwhile, the celestial king in black would be the 4th to reach this area. Now, however, to say nothing of arriving 4th, he still hadn't arrived even though the 5th person had already arrived long ago. Where was he? Could it be? The 5 celestial kings looked toward Ling Han in unison. Chapter 25:18, Passing the Formation. Chapter 25:18, Passing the Formation. The celestial king in black had harbored no positive feelings toward Ling Han. Everyone knew this. Now, Ling Han had appeared here, while the celestial king in black was nowhere to be seen. What did this signify? The celestial king in black had been killed. Gasp. If this were true, the information that it revealed was far too terrifying. Firstly, it was extremely difficult for celestial kings to kill fellow celestial kings. This was recognized by everyone. As long as the gap in cultivation level wasn't large, a celestial king wouldn't be able to stop another celestial king from fleeing. Secondly, how long had passed? Yet, a celestial king had already been killed. To kill the celestial king in black with such ease, just how overwhelming did Ling Han's battle prowess need to be? He had killed him in such a short amount of time, and he had more so stopped him from fleeing. With these thoughts in mind, the celestial kings couldn't help but feel uneasy. They were filled with apprehension. Ling Han simply replied with a smile. He didn't explain anything. He continued to gaze at the city gates before him, with the shards of the symbols floating around his mind. He attempted to piece them together. Strangely, however, no matter how hard he tried to commit these symbols to memory, they would slowly fade away with the passing of time. After just 2 hours, they completely vanished from his mind. He couldn't recall them no matter what. Friend, this stage is about trying to piece some words together. You have to rearrange these shards into the correct words within a limited amount of time. If you're correct, you'll be invited into the city, the Plum Blossom Celestial King said. Ling Han grumbled in his mind. Who had come up with this stupid test? He nodded at the Plum Blossom Celestial King, expressing his thanks. The other Celestial Kings humphed in their minds upon seeing this. They were slightly displeased. Ling Han looked at the city gates again. Meanwhile, the Plum Blossom and the others also did the same thing, with all of them mulling over the shards. The words and symbols would change all the time, so it would be useless even if they had passed this stage before. They would still have to challenge it again. As such, it was also impossible to rely on fortune. Ling Han focused his full attention on the task this time. When the shards appeared in his mind, he didn't try to immediately piece them together. Instead, he started to analyze them first. After all, different words would definitely have slight differences. Sure enough, it wasn't long before he separated these shards into 20 different groups. He then multitasked, rearranging these 20 words at once. With his powerful divine sense, this was naturally no difficult task. A short while later, the 20 words lit up in unison. Very well, you have solved the puzzle. You now have the right to enter the city. Don't be too arrogant. Ling Han read this in his mind. Whoosh! A sheet of light swept over, immediately drawing him into the city. Pu. The 5 celestial kings violently spluttered again. Their eyes were wide with shock and disbelief. He had solved the puzzle that quickly. His achievements will definitely be limitless, the celestial king in green said with emotion. The Plum Blossom Celestial King suddenly faltered before saying, I've heard that Yang Zhishuan was defeated by a mysterious person before. In fact, this person ripped his battle armor apart with his bare hands. However, he hadn't even reached the Celestial King tier yet. Before, I merely thought that this was a rumor. Now, however, it's that brat, the 4 Celestial Kings exclaimed in unison. With a shudder, Ling Han had already appeared in the city. However, this city was empty and desolate, with not a single person in sight. It was filled with a sense of gloominess and eeriness. However, Ling Han was unafraid as he strode forward. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps traveled over from in front of him, after which two figures appeared. They were both around 6 meters in height, and they both radiated with the luster of metal. Ling Han was slightly astonished. These were war soldiers. Crackle. The two war soldiers attacked in unison, shooting beams of red light from their eyes. These beams of light swept toward Ling Han. Ling Han raised his hand to block the attacks, with the 4 beams of red light all landing on his hand. It burns. Ling Han was astonished. This wasn't the regulations of fire. Instead, it was a type of violent and chaotic energy that could cause even him to feel a burning sensation. This was simply incredible. It was no wonder that the foreign realm was feeling immense pressure from the dark inverse realm. In fact, they had even been forced to create a battle beast such as Little Terror. This was because of the overwhelming power of war soldiers. Moreover, unlike celestial kings, these war soldiers could be mass-produced. Once they reached a certain number, they would indeed become terrifying. Explode. Ling Han roared. Boom. His voice transformed into a shockwave. Peng, peng. The two war soldiers were instantly blasted into smithereens, unable to withstand his crushing fifth heaven battle prowess. Ling Han continued to crush all opponents in his way, quickly making it out of the city. What appeared before him was a large river. Again, he was unable to fly across this river. There was some kind of mysterious power in the air that would strike him down with thunder if he attempted to. Meanwhile, numerous rocks would float to the surface of the river from time to time. However, there was seemingly no pattern to when they appeared or disappeared. Ling Han understood that he needed to cross the river by using these stones as platforms. The length of my strides will clearly be limited as well. Anyhow, let me have a try first, Ling Han said to himself. He jumped onto the first stone. Unleashing his full power, he then leaped toward another. Plop! He immediately fell into the water. With a boom, the roaring river directly washed him downstream. It took him 15 minutes to run back to the starting point. It was clear that there was no limit on how many times he could fail. However, if one wanted to make it onto the ranking list with the other supreme prodigies, they naturally couldn't fail even once. Ling Han stood still, observing the changes in the stones and analyzing the patterns of their appearance. After one day, he finally stepped forward again. Shoo, shoo, shoo. He leaped across the stones, crossing the river in a single breath. He glanced back before continuing to advance. A short while later, a gate appeared before him. This wasn't another test. Instead, this was the gate of the world's paramount martial academy. He had passed the 9 Deaths formation, or rather its first level. A person flew out from the gate. It was a middle-aged man who had 3 ribbons of iridescent light around him. He looked at Ling Han, and said, "Congratulations on passing the 9 Deaths formation. From now on, you're a proper disciple of the academy. Dare I ask for your name?" Ling Han pondered for a brief moment before replying, "Zhong-san." The middle-aged man's expression involuntarily froze. "Even if you don't want to reveal your identity, can you please put in some effort and think of a more normal name? It doesn't require that much brain juice, does it? Is it really all right for you to act like this? Friend ZH Zhong-san, do you want to challenge the second level of the 9 Deaths formation?" the middle-aged man asked with a smile. "Only after passing the second level can you leave your name on the Eternal Stone." He pointed to the row of 8 stone tablets beside him, all of which were dotted with names. Ling Han looked toward the first stone tablet. These were the 100 people who had passed the second level in the quickest time. The first name that jumped out at him was Lin Xiaoyang. Lord Lin Xiaoyang is the eldest son of Heavenly Venerate Lin Luo, the middle-aged man said with respect and reverence. Not only was the father a 7th-tier Heavenly Venerate, but even his son and disciple were 6th-tier Heavenly Venerates. This was truly something to envy. He looked down, and the second name that appeared was Han Yeyun. After that was Lu Ziyu. The middle-aged man continued to introduce them, saying, "Lord Han Yeyun, Lord Lu Ziyu, Lord An Feiyu, and Lord Long Yangyun are all prodigies from several epochs ago. As of now, They've all become heavenly venerates. 6th was Guang He, and 7th was Amu. Ling Han's pupils contracted. He had heard of this person before. He was a freak among freaks. Chapter 2519, Second Level. Chapter 2519, Second Level. Amu was a supreme prodigy for the ages. He was ranked 7th on the stone tablet. However, this was only the ranking list for the second level of the 9 Deaths formation, so it didn't signify that he was the 7th strongest out of all those who had passed this formation before. Even so, such a high ranking was a reflection of his freakish abilities. Ling Han was more curious about why Worley wasn't ranked among the top few people. Oh, right. Even though his analysis ability was number 1 in the world, peerless among all people, engaging in fights wasn't his strong suit. Thus, passing levels that pertained to calculations and analysis would be extremely easy for Worley. However, if he needed to battle, he would need to exert much more effort. Ling Han looked further down. In 8th place was Du Shi, another supreme prodigy of the current generation. In 9th place was Heavenborn. With Heavenborn's ability, he only managed to rank 9th. It could be said that Heavenborn was the culmination and embodiment of an entire dimension's essence. Thus, he would be no less freakish than Worley. No, he was most likely even more freakish than Worley. After all, the latter had still been created by humans. Meanwhile, Heavenborn was formed by the celestial realm itself. Where had Heavenborn been inferior? Was it in battle, or was it in analysis and predictions? Ling Han believed that it was the latter. After all, in terms of battle, Heavenborn's physique was far too powerful. His body was equivalent to divine metal, so it wouldn't be difficult for him to challenge all 9 levels of the 9 Deaths formation. Even if he couldn't defeat his opponents, he could still flee with ease. Thus, he had definitely been beaten in terms of analytical ability. Even so, the fact that he had made it onto the Eternal Stone proved that his abilities had surpassed those of the countless people before him. However, there were still those who could suppress him. Moreover, some of them belonged to the same generation. In other words, Heavenborn was still slightly inferior in this area. Even though he was nurtured and born by heaven and earth, there were still limits to his abilities. Ling Han nodded in his mind. He became even more confident that he could defeat Heavenborn. This was certainly not an invincible and insurmountable opponent. Ling Han continued to look down. In 10th place was Hua Furong. This was as expected of the number 1 celestial maiden of the ages. Even here, she was still as impressive as always. Looking further down, Ji Wuming was ranked 29th, while the Rain Emperor was ranked 79th. Even though this seemed low, one had to realize that being able to make it onto the Eternal Stone was already an impressive feat in itself. Where's the Empress and Hu Niu? Were they not powerful enough, or was it because of some other reason? Ling Han felt like both explanations were possible. Even though the Empress and Hu Niu were also monarch stars, their evolution indices had only been around 10. It wasn't all that high. In this academy, however, there were freaks who possessed evolution indices of close to 12. Trying to surpass these freaks would naturally be a challenge. Moreover, with the Empress' proud nature, perhaps she would find it beneath her to compete with others anyway. Hu Niu was more so unreliable when it came to these matters. It was entirely possible that she was uninterested in these rankings. He swept his gaze around. However, before he could even look toward the second stone tablet, several people walked out from the academy gates. Heavenborn. His pupils instantly contracted. The person in the lead was none other than Heavenborn. There were already 5 ribbons of iridescent light around him, and he was like a revered leader surrounded by underlings as a dozen or so people followed behind him. Each of them was a celestial king, surrounded by 1 to 5 ribbons of iridescent light. Lord Heavenborn is going to challenge the 9 Deaths formation again. This time, perhaps Lord Heavenborn will break Lord Du's record. The celestial kings conversed among themselves as they walked, completely ignoring Ling Han and the middle-aged man. Perhaps they simply viewed them as a celestial king with his follower. As always, Heavenborn possessed a formidable aura. It was as if his body contained a primordial beast, with each of his steps causing the earth to shudder. He entered from the location of the fourth stone tablet, with his body immediately vanishing without a trace. Here, each stone tablet rested in front of the corresponding level of the 9 deaths formation. For example, the first stone tablet corresponded to the second level of the 9 deaths formation. Meanwhile, the fourth stone tablet corresponded to the fifth level of the 9 deaths formation. Right now, Heavenborn was already a fifth heaven celestial king, so he was also going to challenge the fifth level of the formation. He didn't plan to improve his results in the previous levels. Linghan swept his gaze over the remaining stone tablets. The names on these tablets were quite different. For example, Lin Xiaoyang's name was nowhere to be seen. However, with the ability to become a 6th-tier heavenly venerate, would he not have the ability to leave his name on these stone tablets? It was clear that he hadn't wasted any of his time or effort here. Or perhaps he had left his name here before, yet he had erased it afterward for one reason or another. Meanwhile, Heavenborn's name appeared on each of the first 4 tablets. On the first 3 stone tablets, he was ranked from 9th to 10th on each one. On the 4th stone tablet, however, he was only ranked 19th. Was this because Heavenborn's power suddenly became insufficient? This was naturally not the case. This was because Du Shi was only ranked 18th, while Amu was only ranked 17th. Linghan pondered over the possible reasons. For example, it would definitely be extremely easy for him to pass the second level of the 9 deaths formation. This was because his true battle prowess had already reached the 5th heaven. This was a crushing advantage. In this sense, his results would naturally be better than if his battle prowess were only at the 2nd heaven. This was without a doubt. This was most likely the same situation for Heavenborn. For the first 3 levels, he had passed them by relying on the crushing advantage of his cultivation level. However, upon reaching the 5th level, he would no longer enjoy an advantage in terms of cultivation level. Thus, his results naturally declined. In some sense, Heavenborn's battle prowess while at the 5th heaven could only be ranked 19th out of everyone in history. Moreover, this was only among those who had decided to earnestly challenge this formation. Perhaps there were some prodigies who kept an extremely low profile, and didn't try to create any records at all. For example, Lin Luo. He was a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, yet his name didn't appear on any of the stone tablets. The same could be said for Zhu Heng and Chu Hao. Linghan looked at the middle-aged man with a smile, and said, "I still haven't asked for your esteemed name." Ouyang Ming, the middle-aged man replied with a smile. Linghan looked at the first stone tablet, and said, "Please wait for a moment. I also want to try my hand at this formation." "Please go ahead," Ouyang Ming said, gesturing in invitation. He was also extremely curious about how prodigious Linghan was. This would also dictate how he treated him in the future. Linghan entered the 9 deaths formation from the location of the first stone tablet. His surroundings didn't appear to change at all. However, after taking a few steps, a wooden puppet suddenly appeared before him. This was identical to the situation in the first level. Boom! The wooden puppet immediately charged over, throwing a punch. Symbols lit up, and it was clear that it had a battle prowess at the peak stage of the 2nd heaven. This was the 2nd level of the formation, so all of the challenges were designed with 2nd heaven celestial kings in mind. Linghan attacked, easily defeating his opponent. After several more battles, he appeared before an expanse of fog. Sure enough, this was identical to the first level. The only difference was that the opponents were more powerful. He entered the fog, immediately inviting attacks from powerful enemies. Their battle prowess was slightly stronger, and perhaps even ordinary Emperor tiers would be unable to rival them. Linghan advanced with confidence. These opponents were merely small fry to him. After a short while, he arrived before a city that sat between 2 towering mountains. This was again identical to the first level. He had to rearrange these shards into words. He looked toward the city gates. Boom! Countless shards surged into his mind, greater in number and more chaotic in manner. Sure enough, it was much more difficult than before. Like before, Linghan first separated these shards into groups. After sorting them into over 40 groups, he then rearranged them all at once. After 15 or so minutes, he suddenly opened his eyes. Numerous complete symbols pulsated in his eyes. This time, it wasn't words that had been formed. Instead, these were symbols of the Great Tao. This was extremely mysterious. Symbols of the Great Tao could actually be used like this. Whoosh! He was swept into the city. However, the symbols of the Great Tao didn't vanish. At this moment, Ling Han suddenly started to hesitate. Should he continue to advance, or should he stop to investigate these symbols? He had a feeling that these symbols were extraordinary. After a brief moment of hesitation, Ling Han eventually decided to sit down. Compared to strength, mere reputation was worth nothing. Chapter 2528. Chapter 2528. Ling Han sat down, completely focused as he pondered the symbols of the Great Tao. He was in no hurry to pass this formation. After all, this was a rare opportunity for him to comprehend these symbols of the Great Tao. However, if he wanted to challenge this formation, he could do so at any time. After at least 3 days, Ling Han finally stood up in satisfaction. He had reaped huge benefits this time. These symbols of the Great Tao had most likely been gathered and formed by the magnificent power of heavenly venerates. To a third heaven celestial king such as him, they were indescribably useful and beneficial. It was no wonder that some prodigies hadn't made it onto the Eternal Stone. It was because they had been distracted here, spending a great deal of time comprehending these symbols of the Great Tao. The gap between these prodigies was already small to begin with, so could they afford to waste 3 days here? Even though there was no explicit rule or explanation, Ling Han had a feeling that each person would only have a single chance to comprehend these symbols. Such rare opportunities could only come through fortune, not through searching. Ling Han pondered for a moment. Should he challenge this formation again? Making a conscious effort to achieve a higher ranking was not something that he liked. However, in order to suppress Heavenborn, he was willing to challenge this level again. He strode forward, easily breezing through the war soldiers that stood before him. War soldiers at the second heaven naturally couldn't slow him down. He arrived before the large river again. Just like before, stone platforms bobbed up and down, with their speed incredibly astonishing. There was even less of a pattern this time, and this gave Ling Han a huge headache. After an entire day, he finally made sense of the patterns behind the movements. He immediately leaped forward. Shoo, shoo, shoo. In just a few dozen jumps, he arrived on the other side of the river. After arriving here, he had essentially passed the 9 Deaths formation already. Sure enough, after walking for a short while, a stone tablet appeared before him again. Surprisingly, this was exactly where he had entered the formation from. Congratulations on passing the 2nd level, Ouyang Ming said. He was still standing in the same spot, and a smile spread across his face when he saw Ling Han arrive. Even though Ling Han's result was unable to win him a spot on the Eternal Stone, just his ability to pass the 2nd level alone was already outstanding. At the very least, it deserved his respect. Follow me, I'll bring you to your residence, he said. However, Ling Han waved his hand, and said, I want to challenge this level again. Ouyang Ming frowned upon hearing this. What was the hurry? Moreover, Ling Han had only just passed the level, so how much could his result improve if he immediately challenged it again? In any case, he had spent 4 entire days to pass the level, a time far inferior to what was needed to enter the rankings. The others all waited for several years before challenging the formation again, raising their power to a peak state. With Ling Han's request, not only would his result not improve, but it might even decline. However, since Ling Han insisted, there would be no point for Ouyang Ming to object. All right, I'll wait for you, he said. Ling Han smiled before entering the 2nd level again. There was nothing much to say about the early challenges. He simply steamrolled them with his crushing power. After arriving before the city gates, he unleashed all of his power. If he wanted to defeat Heavenborn, he wouldn't be able to do so in the stages that involved battle. His only chance to defeat Heavenborn was in terms of comprehension and analytical ability. Meanwhile, Ling Han was extremely confident in these areas. After a short while, Ling Han successfully rearranged the 40 words. This time, they were genuine words and not symbols of the Great Tao. He was drawn into the city, where he immediately unleashed his ferocious power. Peng, peng, peng. His fists were invincible, and he bulldozed through the war soldiers before arriving at the large river. Even though this was still the second level, the patterns of the bobbling rock platforms changed again. Ling Han took another day to comprehend the mysterious patterns of their movement. He immediately bounded forward. Shio, shio, shio. In a few bounds, he arrived on the opposite bank. He then strode forward. When he exited the formation, he coincidentally saw Heavenborn also walking out from behind the fourth stone tablet. His brows were furrowed, and it was clear that he was extremely displeased. It was evident that he hadn't achieved any breakthroughs in his result. Thus, he was naturally extremely displeased. Friend. Ouyang Ming stammered as he walked over. His voice was quivering. Ling Han looked over. What was he so astonished about? Congratulations, friend. You've made it into the rankings, Ouyang Ming finally said. He could finally form a proper sentence again. He was truly unable to fathom how Ling Han's results had improved by so much. Last time, it had taken Ling Han 4 entire days to pass the level. This time, however, he had directly made it into the rankings. Ling Han nodded in acknowledgement. He knew that he would definitely make it into the rankings. However, the most important thing was where he ranked. Where did I rank? He asked. 8th. Ouyang Ming replied. This result was far too terrifying. In terms of the prodigies who were still at the Martial Academy, only Amu had achieved a better result than this. Du Shi, Heavenborn, Hua Furong, and the others had all been pushed down the ranking. 8th. Ling Han was slightly astonished. Even though he hadn't performed to the best of his potential, he was still slightly disappointed that he had only ranked 8th. In his mind, it should have been fairly easy to challenge the top 5 positions. Now, however, the gap between them was still fairly large. However, upon further thought, he immediately felt at ease. At the end of the day, the celestial realm was only a super low-level dimension. Moreover, his evolution index was only 11, perhaps slightly higher. However, it definitely hadn't reached 12. That being the case, was it strange that his result was inferior to those freaks' results? Instead, this caused his fighting spirit to soar. He decided to compete with those freaks in the 3rd level after he fully recovered his cultivation. After all, this result was because of his crushing advantage in cultivation level. It didn't reflect his true abilities. This was evident by looking at the 5th level. Amu, Heavenborn, and the others were all ranked around 20th. Heavenborn had already turned around to leave, yet upon hearing Ouyang Ming's reply, he violently turned around. 8th. Then wouldn't he be pushed down? He swept his gaze over. Sure enough, his name had fallen from 9th to 10th. Displeasure instantly spread across Heavenborn's face. This was because he detested the feeling of being inferior to others. It was also because of this that he challenged this formation time and time again. He yearned to surpass everyone above him. Now, however, he had actually been suppressed by a new disciple. This ticked him off immensely. However, he immediately humphed before turning around to leave. This was only the 2nd level, after all. Thus, many people suppressed their cultivation level to challenge this formation. Even though their battle prowess would be suppressed, their divine sense wouldn't be affected at all. Thus, they would possess a huge advantage when it came to rearranging the words and crossing the river. Ling Han's cultivation level was unclear, so it was evident that he had concealed it on purpose. Perhaps he was a 9th heaven celestial king, thus, Heavenborn felt he needed not pay any heed to this. The only people who could grab his attention were the Martial Academy's Amu, Du Shi, and so on. These were all prodigies who possessed evolution indices of 12 or above. Toward this kind of person, he didn't need to simply become associated with them. Instead, he needed to curry favor with and toed up to them. Ouyang Ming brought Ling Han into the academy. This was an endless mountain range that looked like an entire world. Even with Ling Han's powerful vision, he still couldn't see the end. Under Ouyang Ming's arrangement, he received an abode that was rich with spiritual qi. This was a holy land for cultivation. After sending off Ouyang Ming, Ling Han took out the cauldron that he had purchased not long ago. He planned to test its ability to refine alchemical pills. Chapter 2521, Returning to the Third Heaven. Chapter 2521, Returning to the Third Heaven. The most special thing about this cauldron was its sturdiness. However, a good pill refinement cauldron needed more than just sturdiness. It also needed a powerful ability to resist flames. This was especially the case when it came to refining celestial king-tier pills. To refine such pills, one would need to use flames extracted from the great Tao of fire. Even divine metal would be slowly melted by such flames. Divine metal was sturdy, yet this didn't represent that it couldn't be damaged. It was just that it couldn't be comprehensively destroyed. Ling Han's comprehension of the great Tao of fire wasn't deep, but he had still developed a sliver of understanding because he had refined a piece of divine metal before. He immediately summoned the great Tao of fire to burn the cauldron. To his surprise, the cauldron didn't show any signs of softening even though it quickly became bright red. It was extremely resistant to flames. Upon further thought, Ling Han speculated that this was because some kind of peculiar clay had been added to the materials used in the making of this cauldron. Clay was far more resistant to flames than metal, so by mixing the two together, the resulting cauldron would naturally possess powerful resistance to flames. Of course, this couldn't be achieved with ordinary clay, nor could it be achieved with ordinary metal. In my view, this metal is most likely derived from the impurities produced in the process of purifying divine metal. Thus, it doesn't possess the intensity and murderous aura of divine metal, but its sturdiness can almost rival that of divine metal. The difference is that divine metal has the ability to regenerate itself, while this metal most likely doesn't. It's genuinely sturdy, but once it's damaged, it's genuinely damaged as well. Even after fixing it, there will still be imperfections. This is unlike divine metal, which is whole to begin with. As if it possesses life, it possesses the ability to heal and regenerate. However, to me, this cauldron is indeed very useful. I finally have a high-quality pill refinement cauldron. Ling Han was extremely satisfied. Right now, he naturally needed to refine celestial king-tier pills. Thus, his requirements for the necessary cauldron were also extremely strict. Otherwise, what would he do if the cauldron melted halfway through the pill refinement process? For example, refining the celestial king pills had given him a massive headache. He put the cauldron aside. He then started to cultivate in seclusion, keeping an extremely low profile. This was even though countless people wanted to visit him. After all, regardless of how he had achieved it, his ability to enter the rankings proved a single point: his talent was lofty and boundless. Such a person was naturally worth buttering up to. However, Ling Han was in no mood to make new friends. Right now, his goal was to improve his cultivation. To say nothing of advancing to the fourth heaven, he at least had to return to the third heaven no matter what. He activated the full power of his physique. He then activated the regulations of time, accelerating time and increasing the speed of his cultivation. This was a transcendent dimension, so not only were there more regulations, but they were also more powerful. Indeed, even monarch-tier celestial kings from the celestial realm might be defeated by ordinary celestial kings from this realm. Thus, Ling Han wasn't simply undergoing a process of recultivation. At the same time, he was also improving his grasp of the regulations. The days passed one by one. Meanwhile, Ling Han's cultivation level also continued to rise. Each year, the Martial Academy would distribute an astonishing amount of cultivation resources. This was the only transcendent dimension in the Genesis world, so it naturally possessed an astonishingly rich amount of cultivation resources. Now that all of these resources had been gathered together, there was naturally enough to support the wild and fervent cultivation of these supreme prodigies. Ling Han naturally didn't use any of these resources. After all, he was still far from reaching the celestial king tier. There was no hurry. In any case, these resources wouldn't go to waste. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. Before long, 7,000 years had already passed. To celestial kings, even though 7,000 years was more than just the blink of an eye, it was still an insignificant and short moment compared to their exorbitantly long lifespan. The world's paramount martial academy didn't experience any exciting incidents, either. Even though one or two more people had passed the 9 Deaths formation, becoming proper disciples of the martial academy, they hadn't been anywhere near as freakish as Ling Han. Thus, they naturally hadn't caused a ripple. Meanwhile, Ling Han had kept an extremely low profile this entire time, not showing himself once in the 7,000 years. As such, even though he had caused a huge commotion before, he was also gradually forgotten. Some people speculated that he had used some kind of peculiar technique to pass the formation, perhaps even exhausting his life force. It was because of this that he had achieved such an outstanding result. At the same time, it was also because of this that he had been recuperating all these years. Otherwise, why would he not show himself after achieving such an outstanding feat? If Ling Han exited seclusion at this moment and revealed his true identity, he could definitely still cause a huge commotion. However, if he didn't reveal his identity, perhaps not a single person would recognize him. It was at this moment that Ling Han finally concluded his seclusion. Third Heaven Celestial King, he had finally returned to his original cultivation level. Moreover, he had become even more powerful. However, even though I've become more powerful, the others have also grown more powerful as well. I don't possess any advantage. On the contrary, even though my power of regulations has improved, my body art hasn't seen any improvement at all. In reality, my advantage has been weakened, Ling Han murmured to himself. However, he wasn't disappointed in the least. This was because he was filled with confidence. He was more so filled with fighting spirit. Having competition was always good. Prodigies from countless dimensions are all gathered here, so perhaps there are some people who are keeping an extremely low profile. As such, there are most likely far more elites than those who appear on the Eternal Stone. I truly want to head out for a battle. Ling Han stood up. He had already rested for long enough. It was time to go out for a stroll. He first had a hearty gathering with his wives in the spatial celestial tool, after which he collected all of the cultivation resources that he had been given. He then left his abode, and casually strolled through the mountains. After arriving at the waist of the mountain, he saw that there was a library located here. He walked inside for a look. This library wasn't filled with ancient books, and it housed numerous jade seals instead. As long as one released their divine sense to make contact with a jade seal, they could construct a channel through which the information from the jade seal would travel through. This was extremely convenient and fast. Moreover, these jade seals could also become vessels that could host the divine senses of many people at once, allowing them to communicate and discuss their comprehensions. This was incredibly mysterious and wonderful. According to rumors, this process had been implemented after studying the technology of some technologically advanced dimensions. This library was extremely large, and it more so held countless jade seals. There were also dedicated rooms that only held a single jade seal, and many more people would be standing around these. It was due to the popularity of these jade seals that they had been placed into dedicated rooms. Ling Han walked up to the first jade seal that he encountered in the library. This was the largest jade seal, yet it didn't possess any cultivation technique or whatnot. Instead, this was a directory and catalogue for the library. He scanned through the information. This library truly contained everything. There were jade seals about astrology, geography, history, pill refinement, tool refinement, and so on. Of course, there were even more on cultivation techniques, with many of them powerful enough to be regarded as paramount mystical powers in the celestial realm. Even Ninth Heaven Celestial King forces would fight to the death over them. Here, however, they were available for everyone to learn. Of course, this only applied to the disciples of the Martial Academy. To call itself the world's paramount, this academy was indeed powerful and domineering. Even Celestial King tier secret techniques were freely available for everyone to study. A thought suddenly occurred to Ling Han. Right now, only his Fists of Fury could be regarded as a self-created technique. However, all of his other techniques had been learned from other people. This was far too inferior. If he wanted to become a heavenly venerate, he would need to forge a unique path for himself. He would elevate the level of his fists of fury first. In fact, this was a technique that he had created while he was still at the dividing soul tier. Now, however, he was already at the celestial king tier. Thus, he naturally needed to refine and improve it. However, could he refine and improve it just because he wanted to? He walked over to the fist technique section. There were countless secret techniques regarding fists here, and Linghan greedily used his divine sense to absorb all of this information. However, he didn't practice these techniques. Instead, he simply consulted them and used them as references. He was going to take the advantages of each and then combine them with his own comprehension. Right now, he was simply absorbing this information. Brother Ding, are you going to the prospective partner ceremony? Chapter 25-22, Off to Defend My Wife. Chapter 25-22, Off to Defend My Wife. Prospective partner ceremony? Haha, are you talking about that drinking party hosted by Xianying? When did it become a prospective partner ceremony? Oh, I heard the members of the Martial Academy say that this drinking party would be called a conference of cultivation, but in truth, it is a prospective partner ceremony. There is a mighty figure in the Martial Academy that thinks that everyone should not just be focused on cultivation, and should find some time to find a partner as well. That's true. We people are too excellent. Previously, we have concentrated fully on cultivation, and did not have the idle time to be concerned about any romantic affairs. By now, ordinary women would not be worthy of our notice at all, and probably only the empresses here would be worthy of us. Brother Ding, let me tell you. Even Goddess Luan Xing would be going. What? Goddess Luan Xing is also going? Of course. Because of her, a few extraordinary beings would also appear at the same time, such as Jiyu Hurry, Xiao Yingxiong, Miao Hua. Hiss, these monsters. The sound of the conversation between the two transmitted continuously, allowing Linghan to grasp it. It could not be helped. The Jade Seal was a container, and whoever sent out a message through divine sense would be heard by others who had contact with the Jade Seal. Originally, this was meant to make it convenient for others to share ideas, and was not supposed to be used for idle conversation. A thought flashed across Linghan's mind: the Empress would be attending the prospective partner ceremony. He could not believe the Empress would do such a thing even if it killed him. Even if he really had died, with how proud the Empress was, she would not deign to go, either. She was the type to have men kneel down and look up at her while she slowly made her choice. The Empress was probably kept in the dark. Her main reason for attending this drinking party was for the sake of discussing cultivation. Then he could only go and take a look for himself. Otherwise, what was he to do if someone snatched his wife? Those two people were just talking about the drinking party when the direction of their conversation naturally turned towards the beauties of the Martial Academy. Because the Martial Academy had existed for a number of epochs, even if there were slightly fewer female prodigies, after so many years, a great many female prodigies had also been accumulated, and there would naturally be exquisite beauties among them. An extremely small number of them advanced to become heavenly venerates, but the majority had only progressed until the 9th heaven celestial king tier. There were some among them that were still cultivating in the Martial Academy, and some that were traveling all around, looking for opportunities that would allow them to break through to that cultivation level which they yearned for. There was also a ranking of beauties in the Martial Academy that had listed the most beautiful women throughout the ages. In fact, there were even other time-differentiated ranking lists, with a range of 10 billion years. Actually, it was also the same for male prodigies. Only a rare few had become heavenly venerates, and the majority was still stagnating on the level of 9th heaven. The men also had rankings, but what was being considered was naturally not their looks, but rather strength. For example, in the latest ranking of strength, the one at the very top was not heavenborn, but rather Jiyu Hurry, Xiao Yingxiong, and the others. They were already in the 6th heaven. To be accepted as students by the Martial Academy, they would have to be monarch tiers at least, and those that could be ranked in the upper echelons were even more likely to be monarch stars. In fact, they would have to be freaks with evolution index that reached 11 or 12. Jiyu Hurry, Xiao Yingxiong, and Miao Hua were such freaks that even heavenborn had no choice but be ranked inferior to them. Of course, this was because they had suppression through their superior cultivation level, and in terms of a real battle of equals, it was definitely Heavenborn that was stronger, or he would not have ranked so highly on the Eternal Stone. It should be known that the names of Xiaoingxiong and the others were not ranked on it. It was also possible that they could not be bothered with this kind of ranking. Ling Han developed some understanding. All in all, the pressure on him now was very heavy. Even if there weren't 10,000 people that desired his wife, there had to be 8,000. Furthermore, they were all the super geniuses of the martial academy. Right, off to defend my wife, Ling Han thought as he continued to pluck the essence of various fist techniques. A day later, he left the library and returned to his accommodations, where he began to meld these fist techniques together. While his ability of deduction could not be compared to Worley's, it was definitely in the highest tier. With the time acceleration effects, boundless enlightenment rose up inside him. However, after 2 days had passed in real time, he had no choice but to stop. The drinking party was about to begin. He changed his clothes so he would appear more alert. However, he naturally would not be showing his real appearance. He was sure that the Empress, Hu Niu, and the others would still be able to recognize him, even if it had been 1,000,000 years since they parted. He looked again and again at the mirror, and when he felt he was handsome enough, he pushed open the doors and left. When the two people from before had conversed, Ling Han had also found out where this drinking party would be held. Thus, he headed there directly after he exited from his place. The drinking party was hosted by a person called Shen Ying. He was a veteran prodigy, and going by the time-different rankings of 100 million years, he was someone from the last 2 generations, and had long since reached the 9th heaven celestial king tier. There were not many students that did not leave after attaining 9th heaven. That was because the majority would follow heavenly venerates to battle with hysteria outside the realm. Though they would only be minor characters, and it would be extremely dangerous, the possibility of gaining enlightenment in such extremely dangerous circumstances would also be slightly higher. It could be said that the majority of heavenly venerates had broken through in the realm battlefield. Actually, Shen Ying had also gone to the realm battlefield before, and had now come back for a rest. While he was at it, he had taken heed of the idea of some powerful figure in the martial academy, and decided to host a drinking party so he could get to know these little brothers and sisters, and fill them in on the cruelties of the realm battlefield. His abode was located midway on a peak. Though it was also in the martial academy, there really was a far distance. Even if Ling Han raced madly with all his might, he would only be able to arrive after probably 2 hours, at least. Tap, 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 a sound rang out from behind him. Ling Han was surprised. Though he was not running at full speed, his speed was already overwhelming, and someone actually managed to catch up to him. He turned his head, and saw that it was a carriage that was nearing him quickly, and it was actually being pulled by a dragon. Dragons were the strongest of immortal beasts. They were incredibly powerful creatures, and it was said that they could become celestial kings upon birth. With merely this fact alone, what other race could compare in this world? Hence, dragons were also extremely proud beings. Ling Han had never seen celestial-level dragons in the celestial realm before, because the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable had turned the ancestor dragon into a precious tool, while other dragons had basically perished in the war against the invasion of the foreign realm. Similarly, it was the same for the phoenix race as well. The ancestor phoenix had similarly died in the hands of the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. This was his first time seeing a great celestial king-tier dragon, but it was actually playing the role of steed. This caused Ling Han some amount of surprise. Xiao, the dragon, soared past, and the carriage also passed him by. The body of the carriage was heavily covered with seals. Clearly, this was no ordinary item, either. Otherwise, how could it be able to sustain this kind of speed? It would have long since broken apart. Idiot, come on and chase me. A head stuck itself out of the carriage window, yelling at Ling Han in provocation. Originally, Ling Han would not have taken it to heart even if he had been surpassed. He would only muse ruefully how his first encounter with a great celestial king-tier dragon would actually be like this, yet he had not expected that he would be mocked even when he was just going his own way. The other party was a man, and he was very young. He laughed loudly, and when he said his piece, he sat back down in his carriage. The inner space in the carriage was very lavish, with thick carpets laid out on the floor. Aside from him, there was another purple-robed young man that was sipping wine. Seeing that he had withdrawn his head, this person held the stem of the wine cup gingerly, and asked calmly, "Young Master Joueur, is this really good? What's bad about it? A mere third heaven celestial king that does not even have a means of transport, what kind of important person could he be?" This man countered. His name was Zhuokai, and he had a prestigious identity. His grandfather was a pseudo-heavenly venerate, though it did have the attachment of the word pseudo, so he had not advanced into the invincible cultivation level. As long as there was the slightest link to heavenly venerable tier, could that not be awesome enough? Thus, Zhuokai was naturally arrogant. The purple-robed young man was just about to speak when he spluttered out all the wine in his mouth with a sudden Pu. Chapter 25-23, Sorting Him Out. Chapter 25-23, Sorting Him Out. What's wrong with you? Zhuokai laughed loudly. For a great third heaven celestial king to actually look so embarrassing, this was really too funny. The purple-robed young man coughed continuously, and could not even speak. He merely pointed a finger behind Zhuokai's back. Zhuokai was curious, and turned his head. Instantly, he felt a chill rise up his spine as he almost called out in spite of himself. A face had suddenly appeared at the window of the carriage. Who else could it be but the person he had previously mocked? He had to be seeing things. The other party actually caught up to them so soundlessly. Was he planning to scare them to death? Moreover, the carriage was clearly still advancing at a rapid speed, yet this man could actually keep up with them. His speed was shockingly stable. Just what kind of monster was this? Country bumpkin, scram! Zhuokai shouted loudly, feeling a slight burst of anger at his own embarrassment. He had actually gotten a scare. In the Flaming Frost realm, there were actually a great many people that felt great prejudice towards outsiders, and thought that it was they that had snatched away too many opportunities that originally should have been theirs. This was a very great conflict. If it weren't for the fact that there were a considerable number of powerful figures suppressing this conflict, it would probably have long since resulted in the outburst of an intense civil war. Zhuokai was a local, and had never liked outsiders. That was why he had deliberately shown himself and thrown out a mocking remark when he had previously passed by Ling Han. At first, he had thought that Ling Han would definitely be no match for him in terms of speed, since he had been surpassed by the carriage. Who would have thought that that was not Ling Han's full speed at all? Ling Han humphed, and demanded, "Apologize." Actually, he was a very amicable person. If others did not trifle with him, he would not offend others of his own volition, either. But who asked Zhuokai to be so wretched, and insist on provoking him? Then he would show the other what his temper was like. Get lost. Zhuokai calmed himself, and immediately waved out an arm, sending out a gust of power. He, too, was a third heaven celestial king. This strike was extremely shocking, and had terrifying might. Ling Han shot out a casual punch. Boom! This gust of power was instantly and incredibly easily obliterated. What? The purple-robed young man also paled in shock. He had not thought that Ling Han's strength would be so great. Hurriedly, he moved as well, and delivered a palm strike, aimed straight for Ling Han's shoulder. Xiao! Ling Han's figure disappeared from the window in a flash. Zhuokai and his companion sighed in relief. What kind of person was this? Why was his strength so terrifying? Thankfully, they had managed to throw him off their tail in the end. It was at this very moment that they felt the carriage shudder, and then they were both thrown into the air. What's going on? Peng! The carriage fell onto the ground, releasing a massive bang. At the same time, a powerful impact also ensued. After all, at such a great speed, the carriage suddenly overturning would naturally cause a frighteningly strong impact. Peng! 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 Zhuokai and his companion were violently shaken inside the carriage. Thankfully, they were celestial kings, after all. As they channeled their regulations respectively, they both floated in midair, a protective layer of light wrapped around them resisting the force of the impact. After the carriage had stopped completely, they also pushed open the door of the carriage and walked out. Immediately, They got a scare because the great dragon that was playing the role of their steed was already lying on the ground, its claws facing skywards. Ling Han couldn't help but feel surprised. Just how ignorant was this guy? Hadn't he learned enough of his lesson? He still dared to be so arrogant. Rubbing his chin, Ling Han said, "Has anyone ever told you that you are ignorant?" The purple-robed young man nodded internally. He had known Zhuo Kai for some time, and naturally knew that the latter was a little ignorant. Usually, he would make a lot of enemies, but in truth, it was all unnecessary. If it were not because Zhuo Kai had an ancestor that was a pseudo-heavenly venerate, who knew how many times this brat would have been pummeled, and he might have long since died by now. Yet Zhuo Kai did not have this kind of self-awareness at all. He was too proud. Because he had an ancestor that was a pseudo-heavenly venerate, he considered everyone else below his notice. He humphed. "Kneel down and apologize, or I will make you want to wish for death." Ling Han chuckled. This kind of idiot was really ignorant. Merely conversing with him was practically a humiliation to his own intelligence. He directly moved, stretching out a large hand, and seal after seal formed. After he had replenished himself with the regulations of the flaming frost realm, his battle prowess had already soared directly into the fifth Heaven 1, which was practically on the same level as his body art. Furthermore, his body art was also limited by his own cultivation level. As long as he had not yet advanced into the fourth heaven, he would only be limited to this extent. However, with the different regulations, he was still just at the early stage of the third heaven presently, and there was still space for improvement. Going by Ling Han's deductions, ultimately, his body art and power of regulation should be equal. The purple-robed young man and Zhuo Kai both rose up to counter him. The former was a monarch tier, but Zhuo Kai was only an emperor tier. The fact that he managed to enter into the martial academy was due to his ancestor, or there would be absolutely no possibility that he could appear here. That was the truth as well. It was his ancestor that had brought Zhuo Kai through the 9 Deaths formation, and Zhuo Kai had not gained the recognition of the martial academy. Thus, he did not have his own abode, nor did he have any cultivation resources issued by the martial academy. With his own power, he could not leave or enter. He was merely deceiving himself. What use would their counterattack be? The descent of Ling Han's hand was not obstructed at all. Peng, Zhuo Kai, and his companion both trembled at the same time as they involuntarily threw up blood madly, feeling an agony that could not be described. Only now did Zhuo Kai and his companion know just what kind of hard rock they had crashed into, and they both couldn't help but turn pale. Ling Han stroked his chin. "How should I deal with the two of you?" There was a heavenly venerate standing guard here, so murder was definitely forbidden. There were some rules that had to be adhered to. He'd do that. Then. Once Ling Han was really angered, he naturally would not be appeased so easily. He broke into a grin, and picked up both the purple-robed young man and Zhuo Kai at the same time. Then, with a burst of power, the clothing the two were wearing instantly turned into ash. What do you want to do? Both of them were stunned. Even if they were celestial kings, so what? They still broke out in a cold sweat in their terror. Ling Han's gaze was too evil, right? It couldn't be that he was the type of pervert that would be interested in raping men, right? Don't worry. My tastes are not that hardcore," Ling Han replied, laughing. Zhuo Kai and his companion finally breathed a sigh of relief at this, but then they thought further. "Hey, that's not right. If your tastes are not so hardcore, what are you taking our clothes off for?" Ling Han first threw the purple-robed man onto the ground, then pushed Zhuo Kai onto him. At this, both celestial kings looked livid. Ling Han chuckled, and tapped a finger on a specific spot on each of their bodies. "Ah!" Zhuo Kai and his companion screamed at the same time, feeling as if their hearts had been ripped. Their agony could not be described, and even their bodies were twitching slightly. However, anyone who saw this scene would exclaim with an "oh" in understanding. Two men were doing something shameless, and were even shamelessly moaning and groaning in their lust. Ling Han was extremely satisfied. His skill in giving others a hard time seemed to have improved further. This was worth celebrating. He walked to the great dragon, and lightly patted the latter's head. A force reverberated out, and this great dragon was instantly awakened. When the great dragon regained consciousness, it couldn't help but be enraged upon spotting Ling Han. It was this guy that had blasted it to the ground. It knew that it was no match for Ling Han, and was about to complain to its master when it suddenly saw a scene that even it could not bear to witness. Oh, my poor draconic eyes. Chapter 25-24, Drinking Party. Chapter 25-24, Drinking Party. Your master is very busy, so it would be better for you to send me to the destination first. Ling Han laughed, and boarded the carriage. Though the great dragon had not taken human form, its intelligence was not the slightest bit low, so it naturally knew that Ling Han's strength had already surpassed its imagination. It made no move to resist, all obedient. With it releasing a dragon roar, its claws stepped onto air as it immediately sped forth like lightning. Ling Han lifted the curtain of the carriage window, and looked at the constantly changing scenery around him. He nodded internally. As expected, dragons were beings that were naturally born to rule the skies. The speed was truly astonishing. However, Ling Han looked closely at the few unique metal plates on the dragon's body. There were seals flickering and flashing light engraved on them. Instantly, he understood. Dragons were indeed fast, but their speed had not reached an extent that would shock him. Instead, those few metal plates, which were definitely precious tools, boosted the speed of the great dragon, which allowed it to be so fast. This was almost the speed of a full-out sprint from Ling Han. After more than an hour, Shen Ying's abode was already within sight. It was no problem even if Ling Han had never come here before, because there were too many carriages that were stationed outside this abode. The steeds that pulled these carriages varied greatly, but they were all at the Celestial King tier. There were peacocks, pheasants, giants, and of course, there were also pure humans. As long as one had enough strength, even an ant could be mighty and paramount, and when faced with an even stronger being, even a human Celestial King would fall to the level of a steed. With this thought, it was nothing too strange for a great Celestial King tier dragon to play the part of a steed. The large dragon stopped, and withdrew its aura. Though it was a dragon, and a Celestial King tier one at that, it did not have the slightest feeling of superiority here. If it dared to be arrogant, any single person here could easily slay a dragon. Cautiously, it sprawled out on the ground. It had been a servant for so long that it had forgotten the pride of a Celestial King. Yi, isn't this Shuokai's dragon carriage? Hehe, this profligate young master is here as well. With his personality, he would definitely offend those few female Celestial Kings today, right? He would only be pummeled at most. After all, he has a pseudo-heavenly venerate ancestor, and anyone would have to give his ancestor some face. Lord Shuobing is a top-tier prodigy of our martial academy, and has also battled countless years in the realm battlefield, finally advancing to the ranks of pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. He is only but half a step away from true transcendence. This lord is so heroic and mighty, but why would he have such an unworthy descendant? If a great son could be born every generation, then wouldn't the flaming frost realm belong to the Zhuo clan by then? Many people recognized Shuokai's dragon carriage. Clearly, this guy was extremely showy in the martial academy. His person had not even arrived yet, but he had already caused spirited discussions to rise up among the masses. Of course, all this discussion was negative. Two young men walked out and approached. They were Shuokai's friends, and both of them had a pseudo-heavenly venerate ancestor in their clans. One was named Wu Ju, and the other was Shu Shan. Kai, why are you so late? Come out and take a look at the beauties. The two men called out from outside the carriage. Ling Han opened the carriage door and came out, causing the two men to exclaim in surprise. Because they did not spot Shuokai, they couldn't help but ask, "Where is Kai?" It was not that they were curious why there was another person sitting in Shuokai's carriage, because Shuokai loved to show off. He would often befriend some prodigies so that he could boast everywhere in future. But where was Shuokai himself? Ling Han smiled, and replied, "Shuokai found something fun on our way here, and told me to inform you guys on his behalf so you could hurry and play there." Both Wu Ju and Shu Shan were surprised. They knew Shuokai liked to play, but with how high the standard of the drinking party was, all the prodigies in the last 10 billion years had been invited, Yet Shuakai had actually found somewhere even more enjoyable. Wu Ju couldn't help but ask, "What is it?" Though he was also a celestial king, he had been forcefully pulled up to this level by the incredible might of a great elite. In the future, there would be practically no further room for him to improve. Thus, having fun was his primary mission. Ling Han put on an air of mystery, and made a hushing gesture. Then, placing his hand next to his mouth, he whispered, "It is extremely fun. That's why Shuakai asked you guys to go over." Seeing how mysterious Ling Han was acting, Wu Ju and Shu Shan could not hold themselves back any longer, and hurriedly asked, "Where is it?" Ling Han related the detailed location, causing the dragon next to him to bare its teeth involuntarily. Ling Han was clearly trying to cause trouble. If others witnessed how Shuakai was looking now, would he still have any face to see others in the future? Despicable. This was really too despicable. Yet the great dragon did not dare make a sound in the slightest. It pretended that it knew nothing. Having been on the receiving end of a punch from Ling Han, it was fully and completely intimidated. Wu Ju and the other man were both very intrigued. They knew very well what kind of person Shuakai was. If that other activity was not incredibly fun, how could he bear to miss out on this kind of excitement, but rather play around elsewhere? They immediately summoned a carriage, and shot out according to where Ling Han had told them to go. They feared that Shuakai would finish playing that fun thing, and nothing would be left for them. Ling Han chuckled, and jumped down from the carriage. Then, he walked towards the abode. He was only a third heaven celestial king. This kind of cultivation level was not very high. Furthermore, he had not shown his face much, so it was natural that no one knew how freakishly strong he was, and no one paid any special attention to him at all. After entering into the abode, he found himself in a completely different world. For a celestial king, creating a separate dimension was really too easy. Hence, this abode was also shockingly huge. The place they entered was a colossal plaza, and there were rows of tables set out in this plaza. Every row of tables was made up of over 100 separate tables joined together. White cloth was laid out on these tables, with meat dishes in one row, fruits in another, and the intervals were continuous. A great many people were walking around between the tables, taking some here and taking some there. It was just nice. Anyone could pick up some meat and fruit anywhere they liked, which was very convenient. As they roamed around, they ate and socialized with others. Then, there would be servants passing to and fro between them to pour wine, which had a kind of unique charm. Though there were already several hundred people here, Ling Han only had to sweep a glance over the gathered masses, and he could confirm that the Empress, Hu Niu, and bewitching maiden Ru were not among them. Hence, he grabbed a plate, and roamed around himself. Very soon, he had accumulated a pile of food, and then walked to the side where he began to eat. There was no seating in the middle of the plaza, but there was all around. There were also tables available for them to place some things. However, there were not many people here, because this was a drinking party, which was meant as an opportunity for socializing. What do you mean by just eating at the side like this? Ling Han naturally would not be concerned. The food here was really quite good. Some meat jerky of great celestial king tier beasts was already delicious enough with just simple cooking, and if the skill of the chef was even better, it would be even more delectable. He was very engrossed in eating, and was completely unconcerned about the looks others were throwing at him. However, after wolfing down the food for some time, he still drew the attention of others. A young girl walked over, her arms crossed over her chest. Then, bending down, she had practically shoved her face right in front of Ling Han. "Yi, why are you eating here all by yourself?" "Because I like it," Ling Han answered nonchalantly. The taste of the food here was really quite good. Who knew would like it? The young girl pouted. "Glutton," she uttered disdainfully, then her keen interest returned once more, and she additionally asked, "Why are you not socializing with the others?" "Why should I?" Ling Han countered. The young girl was surprised. "Could it be that you don't know that this is a social gathering?" Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. "Then why don't you join them, either?" "Yi, there's no one good to socialize with," she sighed, looking very regretful. Chapter 25-25, Knowing How to Behave. Chapter 25-25, knowing how to behave. Ling Han cracked a smile, pointed at himself, and asked, "What do you think about me then?" "You." The young girl sized him up, then nodded, and offered her judgment. "You have only cultivated for less than 1 billion years, yet are already a third heaven celestial king. Not bad, quite good. However, you are not my cup of tea." She spread her hands, her expression saying, "You're not my type at all." Ling Han naturally would not be offended. Though only over 1 million years had passed for him in real time, if the time passed under time acceleration effects was taken into account as well, there was still a few 100 million years at least. This young girl's judgment was quite accurate. He smiled slightly, and continued to eat. The young girl was now interested in him instead, and said, "You are quite interesting yourself. I said that about you, but you are not angry at all. Just for the sake of your good temper, I have decided to do you a good deed." "What is it? Do you want to save me from my poor bachelorhood?" Ling Han asked laughingly. "Ian, I have decided to introduce my big sister to you." Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. This young girl was clearly the undependable type. Her big sister had to feel great pressure from having to deal with her antics. "What are you frowning for? My big sister is very pretty," the young girl declared proudly. "In the 100 Flowers scroll this time, my big sister is ranked 4th. There would always be people who were too idle, and would rank pretty women according to their respective beauty. There was an overall leaderboard. All female disciples of the Martial Academy would be encompassed within, but there were also secondary leaderboards aside from this overall leaderboard, and they were differentiated by 100 million years each." Clearly, the young girl was talking about a secondary leaderboard. Where there was the Empress and Hu Niu, her big sister could still claim 4th place. She should be very beautiful. "Since she is so pretty, what need is there for you to be anxious?" Ling Han asked, smiling. "You don't understand," the young girl explained. "Those damn men would definitely show their best side just to court my big sister. Even if it was just a pretense, they would have to act the part very well. I can't rest assured with that. Thus, I want to help big sister choose personally. You see, in front of me, you did not act at all, right?" Ling Han couldn't help but break into laughter. Though the young girl was using a strange logic was still logic. "Big sister will be coming later too. I will make introductions, and I guarantee that you will drool when you see her," the young girl boasted. Ling Han deliberately said, "Really? I have always had very discriminating judgment. Unless she is as beautiful as Luan Xing, I would not be charmed easily." "You," the young girl pointed at Ling Han. Why was this guy so shameless? Who was Luan Xing? Not only was she the top place holder of the 100 Flowers scroll this time, even in the overall leaderboard, she would be considered one of the most beautiful too. The only person that could compete with her was Lin Yolian. But Lin Yolian had gone out on a training trip several epochs ago, and had never returned throughout all these years. Thus, Luan Xing's position as the top beauty could not be shaken at all. "And you call this as having discriminating judgment? You are actually just shameless, aren't you? Humph, as I see it, you have not seen Luan Xing at all. You are merely going by exaggerated rumors, and can only imagine her supreme beauty in your mind. Let me tell you, if I don't tell you who's big sister, you will definitely think that she is more beautiful than Luan Xing," the young girl exclaimed defiantly. "Chen Ziyu, don't just randomly play matchmaker," a voice suddenly rang out, interrupting their conversation. Ling Han looked over. This was a very tall young man, with 4 streaks of peculiar light wrapped around him, an indescribable arrogance clear in his expression. "Busybody, what do you care about what I do?" The young girl humphed, crossing her arms over her chest. The young man showed a hint of displeasure. "My name is Guan Dongyu 1. Don't be so fussy. It doesn't matter if there is a stroke less or a stroke more." The young girl, Chen Ziyu, spread out her hands. Guan Dongyu humphed. "Celestial Maiden Qiuyun isn't your actual sister at all. What need is there for you to be concerned about her affairs? Busybody, you are really such a busybody. I want to concern myself, so what do you care?" Chen Ziyu glared at him angrily. "Damn girl, do you think that you can just do as you like because Celestial Maiden Qiuyun dotes on you? Guan Dongyu suddenly moved, grabbing out at Chen Ziyu. Ling Han shook his head. A man, and one who has an advantage in cultivation level, how can you bring yourself to bully a girl? He extended a hand as a block, and grabbed Guan Dongyu's wrist. Chen Ziyu was only a second heaven celestial king, and there was no way that she could block this blow from Guan Dongyu. Guan Dongyu couldn't help but feel surprised. A mere third heaven celestial king actually managed to block his attack. He humphed. You actually dare to interfere, he roared, his right hand suddenly exerting strength. Power of regulation blazed. He was going to crush Ling Han's hand. Yet his expression immediately changed drastically because his hand was actually completely motionless, and Ling Han was still holding it steadily with his own. A third heaven celestial king had got a hold of his hand, and he actually was unable to extract himself. This was too ridiculous. Could it be that the other had concealed his cultivation level? Impossible. Celestial kings could indeed conceal the peculiar light wrapped around themselves, but it would either have to be hiding it all, or leaving it completely exposed. There was no possible way that one could hide just one or two of those streaks of peculiar light and leave the others. Since Ling Han showed that he was wrapped by 3 streaks of peculiar light, that meant that he was a third heaven celestial king, genuine and completely truthful. Guan Dongyu's expression changed abruptly. There was only one possibility, then. Ling Han was a monarch star, or even more freakish than a monarch star, a monster whose evolution index reached 11 or even 12. I forfeit, Guan Dongyu said, knowing very well how he should behave in such a situation. If they really were to fight one another, not only would it not benefit him in the slightest, he would be embarrassed in full public as well. Ling Han nodded. Since the other knew how he should conduct himself, he thus released his grip. Guan Dongyu immediately turned around and left, not even bothering to participate in the drinking party any longer. Wow, so you are actually so strong. Chen Ziyu's eyes lit up. Ling Han smiled, and asked, have you fallen for me then? I already told you, you are not my type, Chen Ziyu said. Still, big sister likes your type, so your chances are greatly increased now. Ling Han was just about to say something when he saw a woman walk over with swaying hips. She looked very enchanting and graceful, with 2 streaks of peculiar light wrapped around her. She curtsied slightly towards Ling Han, and said, Tan Shuangshuang greets this senior brother. Ling Han nodded in reply to her greeting. Go away, you have no share of this man. Chen Ziyu quickly shooed her off. Clearly, this woman had only come here because she had witnessed the scene of Guan Dongyu being chased off. Why? The fact that a third heaven had succeeded in forcing a fourth heaven into retreat represented supreme aptitude. Wasn't this kind of man an excellent husband material that could not be found without much difficulty? Senior brother. Senior brother. This senior brother. More women walked over, just like sharks that had scented blood. How could Chen Ziyu manage to block them off all by herself? Involuntarily, she couldn't help but shout in anger. Why had you guys ignored Ling Han completely just now then? Right at this moment, sounds of commotion were heard. Celestial Maiden Choyun is here, someone cried out. Big sister is here. Chen Ziyu looked like a weight had been lifted from her. She had absolute confidence that once Ling Han saw Yang Choyun, he would definitely fall for her, and there was no need to worry that he would be hooked by some other witch. The masses surged, and a considerable number approached the doors. What man would not be interested in this exquisite beauty that was ranked 4th on the 100 Flowers scroll? This was a prospective partner ceremony, and those that attended it were naturally here to meet a prospective partner. Like the moon with a myriad of stars revolving around it, a beautiful woman walked out of the crowd, and there were many men tailing behind her, all trying to curry favor with her. Come, I'll introduce you to Big Sister, Chen Ziyu said. Chapter 25-26, My name is Li Sai. Chapter 25-26, My name is Li Sai. Yang Choyun was like the moon surrounded by a myriad of stars. She was indeed extraordinarily beautiful, slightly more beautiful than even bewitching Maiden Ru. She was shapely like a green lotus and beautiful beyond words. If she only had beauty as her strength, she would be nothing more than an adornment. However, she was also a prodigy of cultivation, having a strong presence. There were 5 streaks of peculiar light wrapped around her, and this was enough proof of how powerful she was. Chen Ziyu tugged on one of Ling Han's arms, dragging him with her as she forged onwards. The difficulty of trying to squeeze into the crowds was very high. All of them were celestial kings, and were exuding an intense presence. Once the gap in cultivation level was big, there was absolutely no possible way that they could barge in. Fortunately, Chen Ziyu was shouting as she walked, attracting Yang Qiuyun's attention. The latter deliberately stopped, and only then did realization dawn on everyone as they separated to allow Chen Ziyu to pass through. "Big sister, I found a good husband for you." Chen Ziyu was panting slightly. Barging past this crowd of people was like she had fought a battle with a great many celestial kings, which tired her tremendously. When her words fell, a considerable number of people instantly glared furiously at her and Ling Han. Yang Qiuyun glanced at Ling Han, and asked, "Oh, that's him?" Her expression was completely nonchalant, and she was all smiles. Chen Ziyu turned to take a look, and almost went mad in fury. That was because while she was grabbing one of Ling Han's hands, his other hand was still holding a plate, which he held close to his mouth, and he was still chowing down without a care. "Just how long has it been since your last meal? Or is it that you are the reincarnation of someone who died from starvation in his last life?" Chen Ziyu almost wanted to cry. She was working so hard here, but why did Ling Han not take the matter to heart at all when it was him that this concerned? "How should you be addressed, friend?" Yang Qiuyun asked with a slight smile. There was naturally no chance that she would fall for a third heaven celestial king, but she thought that Ling Han could make a good pair with Chen Ziyu, so she naturally had to show some concern. Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, "My name is Li Sai." Yang Qiuyun was very skilled in keeping her composure, but even she felt the urge to hit someone when she heard this answer. "Even if you are not willing to tell me your name, you don't have to hoax me like this. Right one? Oh, so it is friend Li Sai." She nodded, and then said to Chen Ziyu, "Ziyu, come here. I want to talk to you about something." It was a lie that she wanted to speak with Chen Ziyu. Actually, she just did not want Chen Ziyu to have further contact with Ling Han, and wanted to separate the two of them. Chen Ziyu gave an "oh," let go of Ling Han's hand, and walked over. Yang Qiuyun smiled slightly, and walked onwards. Then, she turned around and cast a look at Ling Han, her gaze slightly fierce, filled with warning. Naturally, she was indicating to Ling Han that he should not have any further inappropriate ideas about Chen Ziyu, or she would not be reserved to move against him. Ling Han naturally would not take it to heart. He merely smiled, and was just about to walk off when several malicious-looking men stood in his path and blocked him off. "Don't have any ideas about Celestial King Qiuyun. You are not worthy at all. Otherwise, we would not mind teaching you how to behave." These people all voiced their opinions, their words harsh. Ling Han glanced at them. They were all third heaven celestial kings. He shook his head. "With so many people courting her, why are you targeting just me? This proves that you guys are too weak, and you only dare to shout at me." Those celestial kings all sneered. That was nonsense. They were all just third heaven celestial kings. How could it be that they would dare to become hostile with fourth heaven celestial kings? "You are right." These people all nodded. Ling Han mumbled, "Am I such a magnet for bullies?" He suddenly moved. Peng, peng, peng. With just 3 punches and 2 kicks, those celestial kings were all thrown onto the ground. This was clearly a celestial king tier battle, yet still became a brawl among hooligans. There was no flash of power of regulation at all. All of his strikes were physical and incredibly coarse. But the battle had still been resolved so quickly. Yang Qiuyun and her entourage had not walked too far off, and when they heard the commotion, they all turned their heads. Then, they saw the few celestial kings laid out on the ground as they moaned, while Ling Han clapped his hands as he walked back to the side of the plaza, and started eating again. "This brat," a young man in blue robes murmured lowly, raising a brow. There were 5 streaks of peculiar light wrapped around him, and his aura was extremely frightening. Very extraordinary. In a few breaths' time, he has defeated celestial kings that are his equal in cultivation level, and it is not just one at that. Is he a newly advanced monarch star, Another celestial king asked, smiling. He was dressed in a tight green suit, and though his words expressed how high his assessment of Ling Han was, his expression was completely serene. This was natural. Even if Ling Han was a third heaven monarch star, so what? The other man himself was a fifth heaven celestial king, and with the superior suppression of an advantage of 2 cultivation levels, the gap in strength was extremely wide. There were 9 heavens in the celestial king tier, and every single step forwards was as difficult as ascending the heavens. How could that just be empty words? Moreover, he was also a monarch tier, at least, and was just inferior by an evolution stage as compared to monarch stars. Yang Qiuyun appeared slightly surprised. She had not expected that Ling Han would actually be this strong. Before this, the first impression that Ling Han made on her was really too poor. He looked absolutely laid back and completely undependable, yet now it was proven that he was in fact a monarch star, which naturally exceeded her expectations. Celestial Maiden Qiuyun, there is no need to be concerned about this kind of minor character. This way, please, the young celestial kings gathered by her said. Yang Qiuyun nodded. This was the world's paramount martial academy. To say nothing of monarch stars, there were even freaks whose evolution index reached 11 or 12. What need was there for her to pay special attention? Only Chen Ziyu realized that she had been tricked, and wanted to seek out Ling Han. Yet Yang Qiuyun had a firm grip on her, so she could only leave helplessly. Brother, you've been rebuffed, haven't you? When Ling Han returned back to his initial place, there were a number of young people who walked over. They comprised both men and women, and all of them were wearing expressions of mockery. Hihi, that is Celestial Maiden Qiuyun. How could she be someone that you can ever hope to ascend to be her equal? That's right. Don't think that you can be so arrogant just because you are a monarch star. Merely now, monarch stars number in the thousands. You really aren't worth much, a beautiful woman said in a sour tone. She had previously tried to go up to Ling Han and strike up a conversation with him, but Ling Han had calmly rejected her. Thus, she was naturally displeased. Now that she had found an opportunity, how could she not take the chance to mock him? Ha 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 ha. These people all laughed. They were no match for Ling Han, and there was no way that they could chase off a 4th heaven elite with their cultivation level of 3rd heaven. Seeing Ling Han rebuffed now, this actually became the source of their amusement. Ling Han shook his head. What kind of people were these? Even if they were monarch tiers, they shouldn't still be so superficial, right? Yet he did not know that these people were all locals of Flaming Frost Realm. In the first place, they held a low opinion of outsiders. Men would feel jealousy, and women would feel resentment, and added together, their behavior was incredibly hideous. Ling Han waved a hand. Go further away. Don't exude a stench that would affect my meal. This guy. Those young men and women were all angered, but they were either 3rd heaven or 2nd heaven celestial kings. How could they be a match for Ling Han in a fight? Naturally, they did not dare to flip out on him. Haha, this drinking party is actually a prospective partner ceremony. We will just wait and see as you leave all by yourself in the end, someone mocked. That's right. If anyone actually falls for him, I will eat these tables. I'll eat the chairs. They deliberately spoke this way to increase the strength of their mockery. Right at this moment, a commotion arose once more at the doors. Luan Xing, Goddess Luan Xing is here. When these words fell, it was like everyone in the plaza had gone mad suddenly. They surged towards the doors, scrambling all over one another. Goddess Luan Xing. The eyes of those young men and women also lit up. Both men and women were susceptible to the Empress's charisma. Chapter 25-27, The Exquisite Empress. Chapter 25-27, The Exquisite Empress. Ling Han's heart jolted as well. It had been too long since he had last seen his wife. Everyone here were celestial kings, but every single celestial king seemed to have gone mad as they scrambled all over one another, surging in the same direction. Previously, Yang Qiuyun had been like the moon with a myriad of stars revolving around her, but now her entourage had basically dispersed. Aside from Chen Ziyu, only the 2 celestial kings in blue robes and green robes were left, but their expressions also held hints of hesitation, as if they were wondering if they, too, should go with the rest of the crowd. Yang Qiuyun's expression looked slightly livid. She had always been proud of her beauty, thinking that no one else could compare to her in this world. Furthermore, in her dimension, her beauty had indeed reigned supreme over a whole era. But now that she was here, she actually could only rank 4th, and furthermore, this was only this term ranking of the 100 Flowers scroll. In the overall leaderboard, she was not able to enter into even the top 100. But in the Empress's case, not only was she top in this term ranking of the 100 Flowers scroll, she would be considered one of the most beautiful even in the overall leaderboard. With such a comparison, how could she not feel jealousy? The crowds were surging back inside because the Empress had already walked in. Her brilliance could not be concealed even if she was surrounded by the masses. Every single person looked like they were completely enchanted, intoxicated by the Empress's charisma. It should be known that these were all celestial kings. It would be wonderful if I could stand by the goddess's side. I just want to look at her from a close distance. If the goddess could just say a few words to me, even if I were to immediately die, it would still be worth it. Beside Ling Han, those young men and women murmured under their breaths. His wife's charisma was truly strong. Ling Han smiled slightly, and strode forwards, heading towards the Empress. Only the Empress was there, and there was no sign of Hu Niu or bewitching Maiden Ru. Hey, what are you forcing your way in for? There were people blocking his path, and Ling Han easily pushed them aside, but they were naturally displeased. They had only squeezed their way in so far after great difficulty. What are you doing now? Don't you know what first come, first served means? Ling Han naturally took no heed of them, and continued onwards. As his terrifying aura unfurled, there was no one that could stop him as they all stumbled aside. In such a manner, he was immediately standing out from the crowd. Yang Qiuyun saw this, and couldn't help but feel even more jealous. Though she did not have any feelings for Ling Han, he previously had just been one of her courtiers, yet now was overcoming all obstacles to curry favor with another woman. Furthermore, this woman was a great rival of hers at that, which made her extremely displeased. This shameless guy actually intends to really court Luanxing? Chen Ziyu was also stunned, and felt that Ling Han was truly shameless. Furthermore, he had not just been making empty promises previously, but had really come for the sake of Luanxing. Merely seeking his own humiliation. Those young men and women that had previously mocked Ling Han all sneered coldly. Who did not know that Luanxing was extremely proud, and she was completely unconcerned about even the advances of Jiyu Hurry, Xiao Yingxiong, Miao Hua, and other such freaks? If that were not the case, there would be no chance for others, either. Who would dare covet the woman that those monsters had set their eyes on? Everyone that saw this scene shook their heads, laughing at Ling Han who had no estimate of his own measure. So what if you are a monarch star? Though the majority of disciples in the world's paramount martial academy were monarch tiers, there really were quite a large number of monarch stars as well. There would be thousands of them with every term. With Ling Han's strength, it was like he was walking on a plateau, no one capable of blocking his way, and adding the Empress, whose personality was one to look down on the rest of the world, her steps did not stop at all. Hence, the two of them very soon encountered each other. No more than 3 meters separated them as they faced one another. Everyone was internally lamenting in pity for Ling Han. The Empress was too proud. Who dared to block her path? Even if the Empress could not deal with him, when Jiyu Hurry and the others found out, they definitely would move personally and help the Empress resolve the problem. Thus, if one offended Jiyu Hurry, Miao Hua, or the others, they would only be offending a single person, but if one offended the Empress, that would mean offending all the freaks of this term at the same time. Only a fool would do something like that. One who was ignorant had no fear. This guy had to have just enrolled in the martial academy. The Empress looked coldly at Ling Han, just about to say scram, when she suddenly started. She did not have the frightening sense of smell of Hu Niu, but having spent so much time with Ling Han, how could it be that she would be unable to recognize her own man? Even if Ling Han's appearance had changed now. Ling Han cracked a grin. He knew that the Empress had already recognized him. The Empress took a step, and, "Xiao, It was like she had become an arrow that shot towards Ling Han. The goddess has moved. The goddess is not just beautiful. She is a great monarch star, and has formed a perfect celestial seed. Her evolution index has probably already reached 11. Thus, though she is only in the middle stage of third heaven, her battle prowess is as high as fifth heaven. If that were not the case, how could she possibly obtain the admiration of Jiyu Hurry and the others? Now that the Empress has moved, what person of the same cultivation level could stop her? This guys is going to be fuck. A series of exclamations rang out as everyone dared not believe what they were seeing. Their mouths gaped widely, even their tongues lolling out in shock. What had they seen? The Empress had not attacked with this pounce, but had rather leaped into Ling Han's arms. This. They had to have seen wrongly. How could it be possible that that haughty goddess would throw herself into the arms of a man? They rubbed their eyes again, yet gritted their teeth once more. Not only was the goddess still in the arms of that man even had an arm hooked around the goddess's slender waist, while his other hand was gently stroking the goddess's glossy hair. Yang Qiuyun spluttered, coughing in spite of herself. Chen Ziyu was gaping widely. As she saw it, Ling Han was not even qualified to speak with the Empress, yet now he actually had his arms around the goddess that everyone dreamed and yearned for. Gods, could it be that she was still dreaming? By the side of the plaza, those young men and women were all gaping in shock, feeling like they were in an illusion. Just moments ago, they had been mocking that Ling Han was trying to aim above his league, and actually wanted to court Yang Qiuyun. But in the end, the other had directly courted the goddess of the martial academy, who had surpassed Yang Qiuyun by who knew how many times over. They all felt their faces flush with heat, wanting nothing more than for a hole to open up on the ground so they could bury themselves inside. Holy fuck, what's going on here? Someone finally muttered. Could it be that this guy is expert in using enchantment techniques, and has bewitched the goddess? That must be it. Still, no matter what, when Jiyu Hurry and the others find out, this brat will be done for. He will definitely be done for. Everyone came back to their senses. It was one matter for Ling Han being able to embrace the beauty now, but how could Jiyu Hurry and the others just sit by and watch? To say nothing that this would be a group of infuriated freaks, even if only one of them moved, how could Ling Han be able to withstand their attacks? Sigh, the word lust was topped with a knife one. Yang Qiuyun also thought of this fact as well. Involuntarily, a hint of a smile curled up the corners of her lips. This time, this was really hitting two birds with one stone. Ling Han was going to be in trouble, but for the Empress to actually throw herself in the arms of a minor character, this naturally would cause her reputation to drop greatly. Goddess. More like psycho. Ling Han had no wish to turn himself into the focus of everyone's attention. Though it was inevitable now, he still pulled the Empress with him to the side of the plaza, beckoning to her to eat. The Empress couldn't help but laugh slightly. Her husband was truly a glutton. Seeing how the Empress was smiling so enchantingly, everyone was dazed. It had been so many years, but who had ever witnessed a smile appear on the Empress's face? Beautiful, too beautiful. Breaking news. Breaking news. Two people rushed through the doors in great hurry. Extremely groundbreaking news. Zhuokai is actually doing that with a man, completely naked, in the open in wild. They were Wu Ju and Xu Shan. To their shock, they discovered that no one even gave them a second look, even though they had brought such exciting, groundbreaking news. Chapter 25-28, Groundbreaking News. Chapter 25-28, Groundbreaking News. Strange, could it be that this kind of thing had become so ordinary and everyday, and that was why no one was curious or concerned about it anymore? Both Wu Ju and Xu Shan were surprised. They recalled how they had excitedly rushed to the destination, yet in the end witnessed two completely naked men lying on top of each other, shouting loudly as they shook. Even their faces had turned green. Heavens, this was really too hardcore, wasn't it? They naturally hated Zhuokai to death. It was one thing that he himself was a pervert, but he actually invited them to come and play together. Don't lead us down the wrong path too. Hurriedly, they rushed back, intending to publicize Zhuo Kai's scandalous actions. In addition, they also wanted to call Ling Han to accounting as well. He actually caused them to witness such a scene. Really, even their outlook on life was about to be distorted by the trauma. What? Zhuo Kai is actually that kind of man? Finally, someone recovered some of their senses from their astonishment, and began to accept this other piece of groundbreaking news. Haha, Zhuo Kai actually likes men? It is possible. This kind of spoiled young master has toyed with so many women that he's grown bored of them. Who knows, he really could want to try something new and refreshing. You, don't say it in such a disgusting way. New and refreshing? I am about to throw up. I remember now. A few days ago, Zhuo Kai clapped a hand on my shoulder. At that time, he must have been having some ideas about me. Congratulations to you, brother. Who knows, maybe Zhuo Kai will recruit you to join his harem after a few days. This damn freak. More and more people were talking about this. This was indeed a big piece of news, and a huge scandal as well. Who was Zhuo Bing? He was a great pseudo-heavenly venerate, yet his descendant was actually toying with men. He could probably kill himself with the amount of blood he would throw up in his outrage. Really, someone asked Wu Ju and Xu Shan for confirmation. Of course it's real. I even recorded it with a memory crystal, Wu Ju said as he retrieved a crystal. Activating it with his source power, the crystal immediately glowed, revealing a three-dimensional scene. Whoa! Instantly, sounds of disgust rang out all around. Two naked men lying on top of each other, roaring endlessly as they moved. Was there any need to ponder further what the two of them were doing? The one on the offensive was Zhuo Kai. Yi, that little wife is Wu Shi. Someone recognized the purple-robed young man. Of course, he presently was not wearing the purple robes. It is indeed Wu Shi. It can't be, right? Wu Shi is a monarch tier, at the very least, and I have met this person before. He is very normal. TSK, how could someone who has this kind of fetish tell you about it? If I had not seen it with my own eyes, I couldn't have believed it even if someone had told me about this. Everyone shook their heads. Wu Shi was considered a young man with good prospects. How could he do something like this? Wu Ju and Xu Shan looked for a while, and soon found Ling Han. Even if their cultivation levels had been forcefully dragged to this level, they were still celestial kings, after all. It was too simple for them to find a single person in a crowd of people. They ran over, planning to have their revenge on Ling Han. He actually dared to trick them, and caused them to witness such a scene. Scram! Before they even opened their mouths to speak, the Empress shouted lightly, her tone filled with dominance. Wu Ju and Xu Shan had not spotted the Empress previously, as Ling Han was really too despicable. It wasn't right until they were rebuked that they looked towards the Empress. Instantly, they were staring fixedly at her. Goddess. It was actually Goddess Luan Xing. They both stood there blankly, incapable of speech, and were at a loss of what to do. Hurriedly, they retreated again. Only when they had retreated to the side did realization dawn on them. Hold on, weren't they going to get revenge on Ling Han? What were they doing now? But thinking of how beautiful and noble the Empress was, they could not muster the courage to make a second approach. Ling Han looked at his wife, and couldn't help but smile. After advancing into the Celestial King tier, the Empress seemed even more noble and graceful, such that even he felt slightly incapable of handling her. As the duo ate, they talked about their experiences throughout the years. They were completely acting as if they were completely alone. Only each other existed in their eyes. Ling Han asked about Hu Niu and bewitching Maiden Ru. Hu Niu got the notice of a heavenly venerate, and was snatched to become his disciple, the Empress related, and could not help but smile. Ling Han wore a strange expression on his face. To gain the notice of a heavenly venerate who wished to take them as disciple, another person would be scrambling all over themselves for such good luck, but the Empress actually used the word snatched, which showed that the little girl had definitely been unwilling at the time. Only the little girl would act like that. Ling Han recalled how Hu Niu had previously been snatched back to the Rock Palace. Wasn't it also against her will? This little girl had absolutely no concept of great opportunities, Everything to her was just done however she willed it. Ru is attempting to break through to the third heaven at present, the Empress continued. Ling Han nodded. Originally, bewitching maiden Ru only had the aptitude of King Tier, but with the use of heavenly Dao Jade, she had forcefully filled the holes in her grasp of regulations and other such factors and became a monarch Tier. Without much effort, she could reach the fifth heaven celestial King Tier, but her progress rate naturally could not compare to a monarch star's, what more when the Empress's present evolution index was definitely more than 10. It was not only bewitching maiden Ru who had improved, Great Lyso had little terror. After this battle beast had come to the flaming frost realm, it was like it had suddenly been freed of its chains. Its progress rate was astonishingly quick. By now, it was already in the fifth heaven, and in terms of merely cultivation level, it was not inferior to Heavenborn in any way. This should be because the overall level of Flaming Frost Realm was higher, and had a very massive accommodating trait, which suddenly unsealed the rate of progression for Little Terra. It should be known that battle beasts were originally born for battle, so what was so strange about progressing quickly through the cultivation levels? Ling Han also related his own experiences, and the Empress couldn't help but feel heartache. She vowed that she would tear Heavenborn into pieces, and feed every single piece of him to the dogs. I have to be the one to avenge myself, Ling Han said seriously. He was determined to defeat Heavenborn. This was his next goal. This was just like how he had previously contended with Ji Wuming. This time, it was Heavenborn instead. Only a strong opponent could allow him to become even stronger. The two chatted for quite a long while, yet suddenly realized that an abrupt silence had fallen on the plaza. They raised their heads, and saw that everyone had turned their eyes towards the entrance. They looked over as well. A man dressed completely in black had appeared at the entrance, 6 streaks of peculiar light wrapped around him. His aura had taken solid form, unfurling like dark clouds, and causing a sense of fear to rise up in everyone's hearts. Xiao Yingxiong, the Empress murmured lowly. This man is very strong. It is rumored that he has surpassed Monarch Star, and his evolution index is as high as 11. So this was Xiao Yingxiong. Ling Han nodded internally. Xiao Yingxiong was a supreme monarch star of the 6th heaven celestial king tier, and his battle prowess has definitely soared to 7th heaven, and was very possibly approaching the 8th heaven. Thus, even Heavenborn was no match for this kind of elite, though he would definitely not lose, either. He knew why a sudden silence had fallen as well. That was because Xiao Yingxiong was presently courting the Empress, and this was something that everyone knew. Yet, at present, Ling Han was actually acting intimately with the Empress. He. Xiao Yingxiong's eyes swept over, and immediately discovered the Empress. A hint of a smile actually appeared on his initially aloof face, but when he spotted Ling Han, this smile immediately froze. He humphed, and strode towards where Ling Han and the Empress were. Here it is, here it is. There is definitely going to be a good show ahead. With Xiao Yingxiong moving, that guy would definitely be done for. Sigh, to actually dare covet the goddess without having enough strength. Isn't that just courting death? Quite a number of people whispered among themselves. The fact that Ling Han had embraced the Empress had instantly turned him into a public enemy. Xiao Yingxiong stood firm, stopping around 3 meters away from Ling Han's table. Flicking a finger, he declared towards Ling Han, "Scram." It was only one word, simple, direct, and commanding. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,